Guys, welcome back. So we've done addition and subtraction with integers, which was our positive and negative whole numbers. And we want to do a little bit of a review of that before we get into our next topic. So if we look here at our introduction section, we have addition and subtraction, and we have some different problems down at the bottom. So if I have a -3 plus a -5, that means I have 3 negatives plus 5 negatives. So in total, what's my answer going to be? Well, we only see negatives here, so we know our answer is going to be a negative number. And then we just want to count how many. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have a -8 here. So now we can kind of see that if we have the same signs on our numbers, right? If they're both negative or if they're both positive, we just end up doing what? We just end up adding them, right? So up here under addition, when it says same signs, we can just say add the numbers and keep the sign. So if I give you a negative plus a negative, we're just going to add the numbers like normal and then keep the sign of them. If I have a positive plus a positive, I'm going to add the numbers and then just keep the sign like normal. So that's kind of how addition works. But if I have different signs, remember when we were doing our football or when we were doing our good guys, bad guys, some of us were using money. We all had different ways of thinking about it. But that's like this -15 plus a positive 10. So if I have the bad guys have 15 guys and the good guys have 10 guys, we want to figure out who wins and by how much. So in this case, who wins? My good guys or my bad guys? My bad guys, right? So we know our answer is going to be a negative. We know that much. But how much do they win by? Well, to figure that out, right, we have to do a little bit of subtraction. And I know it seems a little weird and we're still a little bit, sometimes it's a little bit confusing because it says addition, but we're trying to figure out who wins and by how much. So we end up needing to actually do 15 minus 10 to figure out how much the bad guys win by. And we'll find out that it's a 5. So now we've decided that our answer is negative because 15 was bigger, and our answer should be a -5. So in the case of adding things, right, if they have different signs, there's two ways you can think about it. You can think about it as who wins and by how much. Or you can think about it as subtract the numbers and keep the bigger number sign. So whichever one of those ways is easier for you, I want you to use that one. I don't care which one you guys use, but whichever one's easier for you, I want you to use that one. So now we go over to our subtraction side. And so knowing this, right, knowing that we can add when we're adding the numbers, we're end up subtraction if they have different signs, we can just think of subtraction as adding the opposite. So we're just gonna add the opposite. Now, what does that exactly look like? Well, let's see here. Remember when we have our two negatives next to each other, those were our little magnets. And when we have our magnets, they end up connecting, right? So in this first problem, when I have a 4 minus a -2, those are like my magnets. So those are going to turn into a big plus sign. But if I didn't know that already, and I wanted to use add the opposite, we're going to keep the first number the same. We're going to change the minus to a plus, and then we're going to change the sign of the second number. So instead of a negative, it's a +2. And that's the same thing as if we just made our minus and negative into a big plus sign, right? So we can just add the opposite here. So now we just have a problem that says 4 plus 2. That's a problem you've done for years. We already know that 4 plus 2 is 6. So that's another way that you can think about subtraction. If addition is easier for you, you can just add the opposite. Remember, you're only changing the sign of the second number, though, not the first one. So down here at the second problem, we have a negative 8 minus 4. So we're going to keep the negative 8. That stays the same. We're going to make our minus into a plus, and our positive 4 becomes a negative 4. So now I have a negative 8 plus a negative 4. If we look at our addition rules, if we have the same signs, what do? We add the numbers and we keep the sign. So the sign is negative, so we know our answer is going to be negative. And then we just want to do 8 plus 4. And what is 8 plus 4? 12. So we get a negative 12 here. So those are kind of the addition and subtraction rules that we have been going through. And we've been doing it with just integers, which is our positive and negative whole numbers. But now we're going to look at something called the rational numbers, and that includes our decimals and our fractions. Now our integer rules stay the same. Nothing really changes here. We're still using the same integer rules. Now we're just adding and subtracting with decimals and fractions. So before I even do these problems right here, right, find the sum, what I want us to do is I want us to go through and I want us to decide what sign is going to be used on each of these problems. So for the first one, I have a negative plus a negative, right? I don't care about the numbers. I just know I have a negative and a negative. So when I get my answer here, I have the same sign and it's a negative sign. So we're going to have a negative answer. In my second problem, I have a negative plus a negative. So again, here I have the same sign, and that sign is a negative. So our answer should be a negative. I want you to do that for the next two really quick on your own. Just decide what sign it is. Don't solve them yet. Just figure out what sign it is. So the next one, I have a negative plus a positive. If I have a negative plus a positive, that's different signs, and I need to keep the sign of the bigger number, right? So in this case, which number is bigger, my 2.4 or my 5.1? The 5.1, right? So we need to keep the sign of the 5.1, which means that we need to keep the sign of the positive number. So my answer should be positive. Then we have a positive 5 and a fourth and a negative 2/3. So if I have a positive 5 and a fourth and a negative 2/3, we have two different signs. So we just need to decide which one is bigger. And in this case, the positive number has a whole number and the negative number does not. So we're going to have a positive answer. So now that we know that, we can go back through and we can just do our addition like normal. We don't have to think about our positives and negatives. So over here, I have an 8.6 plus a 7.2. Remember, when we are adding our decimals, you need to line up the decimals. Always, always, always line up the decimals and then just add straight down, and your decimal comes straight down. So over here, I have a 6 plus 2, which is 8. And an 8 plus 7, which is 15. And we said our answer was going to be negative. So I know it's a negative 15.8. If we go to our next problem, we have fractions. So remember, for our fractions, we need to have common denominators to be able to add and subtract them. So my easy trick for that is to multiply by the opposite denominator. So in this case, I need to multiply this fraction by this denominator over here, which is 2. So I need to times this by 2. And this fraction on the right, I need to multiply by the denominator on the left, which is 3. So we're going to times this by 3. When we're multiplying our fractions, remember we need to multiply the top and the bottom. So for the left fraction, we have a 2 times 2, which is 4. And we have a 3 times 2, which is 6. Plus, over here we have a 1 times 3, which is 3, over a 2 times 3, which is 6. Now that we know that we have common denominators, we have 6 on the bottom, we add the top and keep the bottom. So I have a 4 plus 3, which is 7. over 6. Now we could leave the 7 over 6, but that is an improper fraction, and we want to turn that back into a proper fraction. So we want to subtract 6 from the top as many times as we can, and that will be our whole number. So in this case, 6 can be taken away from 7 one whole time, and you're left with 1/6. But we're not quite done, right? Because we said our answer was negative, so this needs to be a negative answer. All right, at this point, I want you to pause really quick and try the next two problems. Try the next two, the 1 decimal and the 1 fraction. All right, so we have a negative and a positive. And remember, if we have different signs, we actually end up subtracting. So in this case, we're going to do our 5.1 minus our 2.4. Remember to line up those decimal points and bring it down. We can't take away 4 from 1, so I need to borrow. And I have 11 minus 4, which gives us 7. And a 4 minus 2 is a 2. And we said our answer is positive, so we are done with 2.7. Over here, I need common denominators, but even before that, I need to make sure that I have just fractions, right? I can't have this random whole number here. So we need to make that into an improper fraction first. So to do that, we're going to multiply the whole number by the denominator and then add the numerator. So I'm going to do 5 times 4, which is going to be 20, plus the 1 over the 4. So I'm going to get a 21 over 4. Now we can make our common denominators with our fractions. So remember, our little trick is we need to multiply by the opposite denominator. So this whole thing needs to be multiplied by 3, and this one will be multiplied by 4. So we have 21 times 3, which is going to be a 63, over 4 times 3, which is 12. And we have different signs, so we're going to be subtracting. We have 2 times 4, which is 8, and 3 times 4, which is 12. 63 minus 8 is going to give us a 55 over 12. And our answer should be positive, so we can keep it there, or we can make this into a mixed number. 12 is going to go into 55 4 times, which is 48, and then we'll be left with 7 12. So either of these answers is fine. Now on the bottom, we have some subtraction problems, but remember our new way of thinking about subtraction is just adding the opposite. So this problem is actually telling us negative 8.4 plus a positive 6.7. Here I have a negative plus a positive. So we need to figure out which one of these is bigger. And that's going to be our 8.4. So our answer is going to be a negative. Over here, I have a negative 3 1/3, but let's make that into an improper fraction. So remember, multiply by the denominator. So we have 3 times 3, which is 9, plus 1. So we have 10/3, plus a negative 5/6. So we have a negative and a negative. And if I have the same sign, remember you just add them together and keep the sign. So this would be a negative answer. Now that we've decided that, I want you to go ahead and try these two problems. All right, so I have an 8.4, which is negative, and a 6.7, which is positive. If I have different signs, remember I need to subtract my numbers. So I need to do 8.4 minus a 6.7. I can't take away 7 from 4, so I need to borrow from my 8. And I have 14 minus 7, which gives us 7. My decimal stays in the same spot. And I have 7 minus 6, which is 1. But my answer should be negative. So I have a negative 1.7 over here. And over here, we have the same signs. We just need to add our fractions, but we need common denominators. So if I multiply this one by 6, and I multiply this one by 3, I'm going to get 10 times 6, which is 60, and 3 times 6 is 18, plus 5 times 3, which is 15, over 6 times 3, which is still 18. We're going to add those up, and we're going to get a 75 over 18. And if we simplify that down, 18 can go into 75 4 times. And then if we do 18 times 4, we get 72, so we'll be left with 3 over 18. But our answer should be negative, right? So we have a 4, 3 over 18, negative. So we're doing the same thing that we did with integers. It's just a little bit different because we have to remember our fraction and decimal rules. But if you just remember the addition and subtraction rules that we did up here, it'll definitely help you out while you're doing this. And then just remember, line up your decimal points, always line up your decimal points, and always have common denominators. Now you can move on to the Explore page and the rest of that checklist.